In the days that followed, Rudy looked for panties that he had been stolen from Roxy. Meanwhile, his parents were fooling around in the garden outside their home. Then Rudy showed up, and he asked for permission to play outside. His parents were happy that he decided for the first time to play outside. Then Paul told his son to be nice to neighbors' kids. After that, Rudy went to play outside, and his parents wished him a lot of fun. Later, Rudy was exploring a forest and he heard boys' voices, who called someone a demon. Suddenly, someone wanted to throw a stone against the bullied kid. Rudy immediately ran and stopped the bad boy with a water ball. They were angry at Rudy and tried to attack him with mud balls. Rudy was superior to them, and he was able to beat them away with his water ball spells. After that, Rudy saw a person shaking, and he was impressed that the bullied boy looked so cute. Rudy wanted to help him and clean him up with his water ball spell. The boy thought that Rudy was trying to bully him, but he realized that Rudy didn't mention to harm him. Then Rudy checked whether the person is a spelled demon. So Rudy was relieved that the little boy wasn't a spelled demon, and he noticed the ears. Later, Rudy found out that the boy is a half-elf, but neither of his parents had green hair. Suddenly the boy cried, and Rudy tried to cheer him up. Then the bullied kid asked why Rudy has helped him. Rudy replied, because he wants to help the weaker ones, and offered him to be his new friend. Then Rudy introduced himself, and he found out that the boy's name was Sylph. In the afternoon they played together, and Rudy found out that Sylph had never met a nice friend in his life. After that, Sylph asked if Rudy could teach him to use the water ball spell. So Rudy decided to teach his new friend some magic spells. In the evening, Rudy said goodbye, and he went home late. Paul was waiting for him and was furious against his son Rudy for a reason. Rudy was then accused of beating up a boy of the neighbors. Rudy wanted to explain to Paul that there was a misunderstanding, but he wasn't listening. Rudy became angry too, and he was very rebellious towards his father. As a result, Rudy was slapped by his beloved father, and he was lying on the ground. So Rudy was disappointed in his father's behavior because he didn't trust him. Then Paul got sad, and he found out about the story that his son had protected someone who was bullied. He apologized to Rudy, and they had their first family argument. His father then wondered why he had argued with his son. Paul could only think of the injured boy next door, and he was afraid that Rudy would turn evil, because he can already use high-level magic with his young age. During the night, Paul was still ashamed of his behavior towards Rudy, and he was afraid that Rudy didn't love him anymore. Followed the next summer started and Rudy was training his sword art. Also in the 6 months, Sylph managed to learn strong spells. Sylph learned quickly and she noticed that Rudy wasn't reciting the spells. Then Sylph asked Rudy to teach him wordless magic too. As a result, Rudy tried to teach Sylph and Sylph immediately managed to learn how to use wordless magic. Later the two played together in the farming fields. However, Rudy realized how pretty Sylph is, and he was jealous of Sylph's looks. Suddenly it started to rain, and Sylph was invited to Rudy's home. Maid Lilia had already run the water in the bathroom and she noticed that Sylph is a girl. Then Rudy wanted to go bathing with Sylph. He wondered why Sylph didn't want to undress himself. Then Rudy just stripped Sylph her clothes down and Rudy didn't understand why she didn't want to take off her panties. Rudy took off her panties by force and he realized that Sylph is a girl. After that his father bathed with him and Paul cheered his son up. Rudy felt guilty because he knew that his behavior was wrong. After the bath, Rudy wanted to apologize to Sylphie. He said he was sorry for thinking of her as a boy, and she started crying even more. Paul was shocked how stupid his son is, because he totally screwed his apology up. The next morning, Rudy trained with his father, and he lost immediately. Paul noticed that his son had trouble with women, so Paul gave his son some advice about women. As a result, Rudy understood what he had done wrong, and his father was able to successfully encourage him. Suddenly Sylphie visited them, and Rudy tried to follow his father's advice, but he acted very creepy. So he just tried to be honest with Sylphie, and he said that he misses to play with Sylphie. She accepted the apology and wanted to play with Rudy again. Meanwhile, Rudy was happy to have a cute girl as a childhood friend. They got along again and were able to have a good time laughing together. A few weeks later, Rudy found out that Zenith is pregnant again, and the whole family was happy. In the afternoon at lunch, Maid Lilia suddenly told them she was pregnant too, and Paul was shocked by the news. So Paul apologized for cheating on Zenith with Maid Lilia. In the evening, Zenith cried and couldn't believe that Paul had betrayed her with Maid Lilia. Then Zenith asked what Maid Lilia was up to now, because she wanted to help Zenith give birth and then go back to her hometown. Zenith knew that she would not survive the journey to her hometown, and that her baby would die as a result. Zenith didn't know what to do anymore. Rudy already considered Maid Lilia part of the family and he wanted to help her out. Then Rudy tried to put all the blame on his father and his mother believed Rudy. but maid Lilia said he was innocent. After that, Rudy tried to convince his mother to keep Lilia as their maid. Zenith was still sad, and she accepted Rudy's decision to let Lilia stay in her house. So Zenith told Lilia that she is now part of her family. Also, Zenith wanted to scold Paul for cheating on her. Meanwhile, Lilia was grateful about the help of Rudy. The next morning, Paul vented his anger on Rudy, and Lilia wondered why Rudy had helped her. Then we see how the problem started, because Lilia was very horny every night. The reason was Paul and Zenith moaned every night, and she needed some contacts with men too. In the present, she was very grateful that Rudy had helped her. She always saw Rudy as a pervert, but since yesterday, maid Lilia regarded him as a saint who saved her baby's life. A year later, Rudy's new siblings were born, and Paul played with them every day. Suddenly, the two girls started crying, and the mothers immediately took care of them. Rudy watched the parents babysitting, and he wanted to be a really cool big brother. Since the birth of his siblings, Rudy got to know Lilia better. Also, he learned that Lilia and Paul had known each other since childhood. Then Rudy was called to sword training. He knew his father was a Rizzler, but he still respected his father because he is very strong. Then Rudy tried to attack him with magic, but his father had observation Honki and was able to dodge Rudy's attack. As a result, Rudy lost and his father made fun of him, so Rudy teased his father. Suddenly Paul asked if his mother would be angry if he now sleeps with Lilia. Rudy said he shouldn't do it, but Rudy was a man too, and he understood his father. He knew his father was scum, but he liked him very much. Suddenly Paul asked if he wanted to go to school someday. Paul said he didn't enjoy school anyway, because there were only nobles. Rudy found out that noble girls don't do sports, and they become very fat in the future. Then Paul advised his son that he should only try to focus on one girl. Later on, Rudy realized that Sylphie will soon overtake him with her knowledge of magic. Suddenly, Sylphie noticed that he was thinking about something the whole time. Rudy said that he would like to go to school, but Sylphie became sad. She didn't want Rudy to leave her and started to cry. Rudy cheered her up, and he had no intention of leaving her. In the evening, he already dreamed of marrying Sylphie to have a lot of fun with her. Suddenly, his father appeared, and he had a letter for Rudy. Roxy told him that she had a new student, who was very similar to him. Her new student was also a pervert, and often stole her panties. Roxy was often groped by him and she punished him. She also suggested Rudy to go to the Renoa magic school to learn more about magic. Paul was impressed with Roxy as she became a Water King class mage. Then he asked Rudy if he had really stolen Roxy's panties. That night, Rudy thought about Roxy's words about going to a magic academy. The next morning, he had breakfast with his family and he asked his father a favor. Paul was surprised that Rudy was planning to go to Renoa magic school. Then he asked his father if he could go to magic school with Sylphie. He asked his father to pay the fees for the two, but he refused. The reason was that Rudy's family didn't even have enough money to pay the school fees for one person. Then Rudy asked him to find a job so that he could also pay Sylphie's school fees. Paul wanted to help his son and supported him with his idea. The next day, a female beastman showed up. Rudy was impressed by beastman Jelane's sexy body. Then Zenith greeted her old adventurer friend Jelane. She met baby girl Nora and said that luckily she doesn't look like Paul. Suddenly Zenith and Lilia said goodbye to Rudy, and Paul explained the circumstances to him. As a result, Paul started fighting against his son, and Rudy tried to defeat him with magic. Paul was very talented with the sword, and he was able to corner his son. In the fight, Paul showed his true strength. He wanted to show Rudy that he lacked strength. However, Rudy was knocked out and woke up in a carriage. Then he met Jelane and he was confused. He didn't know why he rode in a carriage with her.